A billionaire just ended a Prime Minister's career in under 10 minutes. Elon Musk and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced off live at a London tech summit yesterday. What was supposed to be a calm policy discussion about Britain's digital future turned into the most brutal political takedown in modern British history, and every second of it was captured on camera, watched by millions in real time. If you want to see how this story ends, hit subscribe now, because what happens next will shock you. The Global Innovation Forum in London was meant to showcase Britain's technological leadership. Prime Minister Starmer walked onto the stage smiling, clearly hoping to use this high-profile event to rebuild his crumbling public image after weeks of scandals and policy failures. He needed a win. He needed to look strong, competent, and in control. Instead, he got the opposite. Sitting across from him was Elon Musk, the world's richest man, owner of X, and someone who's never been afraid to challenge governments directly. And from the moment the conversation started, it was clear Musk hadn't come to play nice. The tension was immediate. While the moderator tried to keep things diplomatic, Musk cut straight through the formalities. He didn't waste time with pleasantries or polite small talk. He went directly for the Prime Minister's most controversial policies, specifically the recent crackdown on online speech and the government's push for expanded digital surveillance. "Let me ask you something, Prime Minister," Musk said, his tone calm but razor-sharp. "These new regulations you're implementing, are they really about public safety, or are they about public control?" The room went silent. You could feel the air change. Cameras zoomed in on Starmer's face. He paused, clearly caught off guard by the directness of the question. He tried to recover, launching into a rehearsed explanation about how these measures were necessary to combat misinformation, protect citizens from harmful content, and ensure national security in an increasingly dangerous digital landscape. But Musk wasn't accepting the political spin. He interrupted. "With respect, Prime Minister, that sounds like the kind of answer politicians give when they're avoiding the real question." Musk leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, completely in control. "Let me be more specific. Your government has been pressuring social media platforms to remove content that's critical of your administration. Not illegal content, not terrorist content, political criticism. How is that protecting democracy?" Starmer's face flushed. He stammered, trying to deflect blame onto independent regulatory bodies, claiming they made those decisions autonomously, without government interference. It was a weak defence, and everyone in the room could sense it. Then Musk dropped the bomb. "That's interesting," Musk said, pulling out a tablet. "Because I have internal communications here, leaked documents from your own administration, that tell a very different story." He held up the screen for the cameras. "These are emails and messages from Downing Street officials directly instructing social media companies to suppress specific accounts, remove posts critical of government policy, and shadow ban journalists who were reporting on your scandals." The audience gasped. The moderators looked panicked. Starmer's face went pale. He tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing, but no coherent words came out. He finally managed to say something about needing to verify the authenticity of those documents, about how they could be taken out of context, about how Musk didn't understand the full picture. But Musk was already 3 steps ahead. "I anticipated you'd say that," he replied. "So I had my team verify these documents with 3 independent cybersecurity firms. They're authentic, and they're dated. The most recent one is from last week." The room erupted in whispers. Journalists in the audience were frantically typing on their phones, live tweeting every word. One reporter would later write, "This isn't a debate. This is a public execution." Then Musk delivered the knockout line. He leaned forward, looked directly at Starmer, and said slowly and deliberately, "Prime Minister, you can't build the future on lies. The world doesn't trust politicians who fear the truth. And right now, you look terrified." Half the audience applauded. The other half sat in stunned silence. Starmer tried to respond, his voice shaking, attempting to regain some semblance of authority, but it was too late. The damage wasn't just done, it was catastrophic. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were exploding across social media. 10 million views in 15 minutes on X alone. Trending hashtags: hashtag Musk versus Starmer, hashtag UK in crisis, hashtag transparency matters. Musk himself reposted the clip with just one word: truth. Backstage, absolute chaos. According to witnesses, Starmer's aides were in full panic mode. Some were frantically calling Downing Street. Others were arguing about damage control strategies. One aide reportedly tried to downplay it, calling it just a social media moment that would blow over by tomorrow. Another shot back. Are you insane? This isn't a tweet. This is a declaration of war. By the time Starmer left the venue through a back exit, avoiding the waiting press, the political landscape had already shifted beneath his feet. Opposition MPs were calling emergency press conferences. Conservative Party leaders were demanding immediate parliamentary inquiries. Even members of Starmer's own Labour Party were privately expressing shock and concern. But the public reaction was even more powerful. Within hours, thousands of people gathered outside Parliament Square. They weren't organised protesters or political activists. They were ordinary citizens who'd seen the clip and decided enough was enough. They carried signs reading, "End the censorship regime," "Truth not control," and "We stand with Musk." Their chants echoed through the streets of London. "Resign now. Call an election." Inside Number 10, Downing Street, the Prime Minister's official residence, the lights stayed on through the night. Reports emerged of ministers rushing in and out, emergency meetings being called, and frantic attempts to craft a response. Starmer reportedly stormed into the communications room, demanding to know how Musk had obtained those documents and why no one had warned him this was coming. The government tried to fight back. They released a statement claiming Musk had fundamentally misinterpreted routine communications and that he had irresponsibly taken private discussions out of context for political purposes. They accused him of spreading misinformation and potentially damaging national security. But the British public wasn't buying it. By this point, trust in Starmer's government was already at historic lows. This confrontation didn't create the crisis. It detonated a powder keg that had been building for months. The next morning, the British press was merciless. Front-page headlines read, "Musk destroys Starmer in brutal live showdown. Prime Minister humiliated on global stage. UK government in freefall. After tech billionaire exposes censorship plot." Even newspapers that typically supported Labour admitted this was an unprecedented disaster. The Times called it a historic political implosion. The Guardian wrote that Starmer had been comprehensively outmanoeuvred and outclassed. Starmer attempted a televised response, hoping to project strength and authority. Instead, he looked exhausted and defensive. He stood at a podium, reading from prepared remarks, calling Musk's actions reckless, irresponsible, and potentially damaging to national security. Journalists weren't having it. They bombarded him with questions. "Prime Minister, were those emails authentic? Did your office pressure social media companies? Will you release the full communications Musk referenced? Why should the public trust you now?" Starmer dodged and deflected, repeating the same prepared lines over and over. But every non-answer sounded like an admission. Every deflection felt like confirmation. By the end of the press conference, even his own supporters were calling it a disaster. One political analyst said on live TV, "He just made it worse. Every time he speaks, he digs the hole deeper." Meanwhile, the fallout was spreading far beyond Britain's borders. CNN called it a defining moment in the age of digital power, when a tech billionaire held more influence than an elected leader. Fox News ran segments praising Musk as a defender of free speech. Even international outlets like Al Jazeera and Deutsche Welle were covering it as a major geopolitical story. In Washington, the White House was forced to respond. When asked about the confrontation, the press secretary gave a carefully worded statement. "We value our relationship with the United Kingdom, but transparency and accountability are fundamental to any healthy democracy." It was diplomatic language, but the subtext was clear. The US was distancing itself from Starmer's embattled government. In Brussels, EU officials were reportedly in emergency meetings, terrified that Musk's revelations could trigger a domino effect. If the UK government had been pressuring tech platforms to silence dissent, what about other European governments? One German politician admitted on camera, "This could open Pandora's box. People across Europe will start demanding answers about what their own governments are doing behind closed doors." Russia and China, predictably, seized the propaganda opportunity. Russian state media ran headlines like "Western democracy exposed as sham. UK Prime Minister caught censoring critics." Chinese commentators mocked Britain's hypocrisy and authoritarian impulses disguised as progressive policy. And through it all, Musk remained completely calm. He didn't gloat, he didn't attack. He simply posted 5 words on X. "The truth doesn't need permission." That single sentence became a rallying cry. Within 24 hours, politicians in Canada, Australia, and across Europe were calling for investigations into government influence over social media platforms. Musk hadn't just humiliated one prime minister, He'd accidentally sparked a global conversation about digital freedom and government overreach. Back in Britain, the pressure became unbearable. Senior members of Starmer's own party began turning against him. Some held secret meetings with opposition leaders, discussing potential leadership challenges. Rumours of cabinet resignations spread. One anonymous cabinet member was quoted saying, "He's finished." Musk didn't just embarrass him, he exposed the entire rotten system. Then came the breaking point. During a late-night emergency session of Parliament, something unprecedented happened. Dozens of MPs, including several from Starmer's own Labour Party, stood up and declared they had lost confidence in the Prime Minister's leadership. They accused him of betraying democratic principles, of using state power to silence critics, and of lying to Parliament and the public. A motion of no confidence was introduced. The chamber erupted in chaos. Opposition MPs were shouting. Labour backbenchers looked torn between loyalty and self-preservation. And through it all, Starmer sat stone-faced, watching his government collapse around him. When the vote came, it wasn't even close. The motion passed. For the first time in modern British history, a Prime Minister had been brought down not by a scandal or policy failure, but by a 10-minute conversation with a tech billionaire. The next morning, Britain woke up to a new reality. Crowds filled the streets of every major city. Some celebrated, others protested. But everyone agreed on one thing. The old order had fallen. Calls for a general election were deafening. Constitutional experts debated the next steps. Even the king was being briefed hourly on the developing crisis. Starmer appeared one final time before the cameras. His voice was shaking, but he tried to sound defiant. "I will not be intimidated by billionaires or mob rule," he said. But when reporters asked if he would call a general election, he paused, just for a moment. That hesitation was captured on camera, and within minutes it had gone viral. A Prime Minister, frozen, unable to answer a simple question. Hours later, facing the inevitable, Starmer's office released a statement. "In the interest of national stability, the Prime Minister will advise His Majesty to dissolve Parliament. A general election will be held." The announcement triggered celebrations across the country. Crowds outside Parliament erupted in cheers. Fireworks lit up the London sky. Britain, exhausted and divided, was heading back to the polls. And Elon Musk, sitting somewhere thousands of miles away, posted a simple response. A British flag emoji and one word: accountability. That post became one of the most shared in UK history. For Keir Starmer, it was over. His political career had been destroyed in under 10 minutes by a man who simply asked uncomfortable questions and refused to accept rehearsed answers. For Britain, it was the beginning of something new. Uncertain, chaotic, but undeniably democratic. And as the dust settled, one truth remained impossible to ignore. Elon Musk hadn't just humiliated a Prime Minister. He had reminded an entire nation that leaders are supposed to answer to the people, not the other way around. The era of silence is over. The question now is, what kind of government will Britain choose next? So here's my question for you. Do you think Musk was right to expose this live on stage, or did he cross a line? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear different perspectives on this. And if you want to stay updated as this historic story continues to unfold, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this election is going to be unlike anything Britain has seen in decades. This is just the beginning.